From beginning to end, this movie feels like watching a real television broadcast, almost like a documentary investigating a bizarre and unexplained event that happened on Halloween night, October 31st, 1977, during the sixth season of a live talk show called Late Night with the Devil. Before getting into the show itself, the film first explains the energy crisis of the 1970s. After the United States announced support for Israel during a military conflict, several Middle Eastern countries restricted oil exports. Since almost everything depended on fuel, prices skyrocketed and the global economy fell into chaos. At the same time, unrest was spreading across America. Many people even referred to the era as the Age of the Devil because the media was constantly reporting on cults and strange occult activities appearing all over the country. In the middle of all that panic, on April 4th, 1971, the first episode of Night Owls aired on UBC, hosted by a famous Chicago radio personality named Jack Delroy. Airing 5 nights a week, Night Owls quickly became a huge success. The show mixed celebrity interviews with live music, comedy sketches, and games, helping its ratings explode almost overnight. UBC was so impressed that they immediately gave Jack a 5-year contract. Around the same time, Jack and his wife Madeleine also became media favorites because of how perfect their relationship seemed. Besides his wife's support, Jack was also closely connected to a private men's club known as The Grove, located deep within the California redwood forests. Also known as Bohemian Grove, the organization had existed since the 1800s and was rumored to include politicians, celebrities, and wealthy businessmen among its members. People claimed the group performed mysterious rituals, not only to boost someone's career, but also to destroy lives. Many fans of Jack Delroy often speculated about his connection to the organization, even back when he worked as a radio host. Despite the success of Night Owls, Jack still struggled to surpass the country's #1 late-night program. Even though he constantly received nominations for Best Host and Best Show, he never actually won. Then in September 1976, tragedy struck when Madeleine was diagnosed with terminal lung cancer. A month later, she appeared on Jack's show, and that episode became the highest-rated broadcast Night Owls had ever achieved. But only 2 weeks later, Madeleine passed away. Jack was devastated and completely disappeared from the public eye for an entire month. Unfortunately, the show's ratings started collapsing soon after. Guest appearances kept going wrong, episodes became chaotic, and Jack's contract with UBC was also nearing its end after 5 years on air. Then 1 year later, on Halloween night of 1977, a desperate Jack Delroy prepared a very special live episode that he hoped would change his fate forever. That night changed everything. Welcome to Late Night with the Devil.
You knock him dead.
The film then warns viewers that what they are about to see is newly discovered master footage from that night, along with never-before-seen behind-the-scenes recordings from a live broadcast that completely shocked the United States at the time. The show begins by introducing its guests for the evening. There is Christo, a well-known psychic, Carmichael Haig, a former magician and professional skeptic, Dr. June Ross Mitchell, a parapsychologist, and a mysterious 13-year-old girl named Lily. Assisting Jack throughout the show is his longtime partner, Gus McConnell. Like most late-night programs of the era, Night Owls opens with lighthearted comedy between Jack and Gus. Jack also takes a moment to thank the audience for continuing to support the show, especially after he disappeared from television for a month following his wife's death. Even after everything that happened, the audience's interest in Night Owls was still incredibly strong. Not long after that, Jack welcomes the first guest of the night, Christo. Jack asks whether Halloween has a special meaning for someone involved in the paranormal. Christo explains that Halloween is believed to be a time when the barrier between the living and the dead becomes weaker, giving lost spirits one final chance to settle unfinished business. He also claims that he can hear the voices of the dead whenever he chooses, and that he can control this ability at will. To prove it, Christo begins performing psychic readings for members of the studio audience. At first, things do not go smoothly. He incorrectly guesses the name of a spirit and becomes the subject of laughter. But moments later, the atmosphere suddenly changes when he accurately describes the child of an audience member who had taken their own life 5 years earlier, claiming the spirit had finally found peace. What makes the moment so unsettling is that Christo supposedly had no prior knowledge about anyone attending the show. Then just as the program is about to cut to a commercial break, Christo suddenly screams in pain and clutches his head. He claims to hear a spirit named Minnie filled with overwhelming sadness. At the same time, he describes seeing someone connected to her, a man who is unmarried yet still wears a wedding ring. Within seconds, the entire studio atmosphere turns terrifying. Christo's eyes roll completely white, and suddenly the studio lights go out.
It's Minnie! Minnie!
Christy?
Eric needs to talk to you! Minnie, please accept!
Right after that, the film cuts to black and white backstage footage recorded during the commercial break, footage that had supposedly never been released before. It quickly becomes clear that Christo's breakdown was not staged at all, especially the terrifying moment at the end when the studio lights suddenly failed. Even backstage, he still looks shaken and stressed to the point of getting a nosebleed. What makes the incident even stranger is that out of hundreds of episodes produced by the network, this was reportedly the first time the studio lights had malfunctioned on their own. Meanwhile, Gus quietly admits that he feels uncomfortable around the young girl Lily backstage, especially after noticing a restraint chair and a knife prepared for the upcoming segment. But neither Jack nor the show's producer, Leo Fisk, takes his concerns seriously. Instead, Leo tells Jack to greet several important sponsors and broadcasting executives sitting in the front row. But Jack refuses. Rather than trying to impress the network bosses personally, he wants the show itself to prove its value. Soon after, the program resumes, and Jack reminds Christo to stay calm before introducing the next guest, Carmichael Haig. Unlike Christo, who claims to communicate with spirits, Carmichael is a former magician and a famous skeptic dedicated to exposing paranormal frauds. He proudly talks about investigating supposedly haunted locations, including the infamous Amityville house, where he claims he found absolutely nothing supernatural. He also mentions that famous paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren once rejected his invitation to collaborate. To make things even more interesting, Carmichael has publicly offered a $100,000 reward to anyone who can scientifically prove genuine supernatural powers. Over the years, nobody has managed to claim it. Carmichael argues that Christo's earlier psychic reading could easily have been a lucky guess, especially since he had already made mistakes before. The tension between them quickly grows worse. Christo starts coughing violently, drinks water nonstop, and eventually loses his temper completely by throwing his drink at Carmichael. At that point, Jack suddenly realizes something disturbing. He believes the spirit named Minnie that Christo mentioned earlier may actually have been Madeline, his late wife, because Minnie was her private nickname. And the unmarried man still wearing a wedding ring could only be Jack himself, since he still wears his wedding band even after Madeline's death. But before anyone can process what that means, Christo suddenly collapses. Without warning, he vomits thick black fluid onto the stage, forcing the show to immediately cut to another commercial break. Backstage, Christo's condition becomes horrifying. Veins begin bulging around his neck, and his terrified wife rushes him away for medical treatment.
Claire! And someone just clean up all this mess.
I need a doctor!
Get him to his dressing room.
Things not right!
The Surgeon General strongly advised
It's gonna be okay.
with the dead.
Even then, Carmichael still insists the entire thing is fake, including the mention of Minnie, believing it is all part of a desperate attempt to boost the show's ratings. He even starts suggesting that the Grove may somehow be involved in orchestrating the whole spectacle. Jack completely ignores the accusations because he is too focused on preparing the next segment. At the same time, Leo reveals that viewers across the country are flooding the network with phone calls asking what just happened and whether Christo is still alive. And from Leo's perspective, that can only mean one thing. The audience numbers are rising fast. Once the crew regains control of the situation, the live broadcast finally resumes. Jack thanks the viewers who called in out of concern and explains that Christo is currently receiving medical attention backstage. Not long after that, sirens can be heard outside, strongly suggesting that Christo has been rushed to the hospital by ambulance. Trying to move the show forward, Jack introduces the next guest of the evening, Dr. June Ross Mitchell, a parapsychologist and author of a book called Conversation with the Devils. As Jack explains, parapsychology is the scientific study of supernatural phenomena. But before June and her patient Lily are brought onto the stage, Jack decides to show the audience a recorded video from June's Psychological Research Center. He also warns viewers, especially children, that the footage may be disturbing. The video focuses on a cult known as Abraxas, a group suspected of kidnapping children and illegally stockpiling weapons. Rumors claim that many of the children raised inside the cult were being prepared as ritual sacrifices. According to the cult's leader, anyone who witnessed their ceremonies would fall under the influence of a demonic entity connected to Abraxas and become completely obedient, almost like they had been hypnotized. Then in August of 1974, federal agents surrounded the cult's compound. In response, the cult leader ordered all of his followers to take their own lives together by pouring gasoline over themselves and setting the entire house on fire. But among the ruins, investigators discovered a single survivor, a 10-year-old girl named Lily. Although she escaped alive, Lily could barely remember what happened inside the compound. That immediately raised disturbing questions. Was she intentionally spared as part of the cult leader's larger plan, or was she simply lucky enough to survive? Because of Lily's increasingly strange behavior afterward, the FBI eventually contacted Dr. June to provide psychological treatment. Lily had reportedly experienced disturbing episodes before, including once running to the rooftop of a building and standing there motionless for no reason at all. The footage then shows one of June's earliest recorded therapy sessions with Lily from June 10, 1976. During the session, Lily suddenly experiences what appears to be possession, and her screams become so intense that the recording tape itself snaps. Not long after, June and Lily finally enter the studio. From the very beginning, Lily behaves strangely, constantly staring directly into the camera with an unsettling expression. She also speaks to Jack with an unusual level of maturity, reassuring him that he will eventually recover from the loss of his wife and that his television ratings will rise again soon. Jack is visibly caught off guard by how calmly and intelligently a 13-year-old girl speaks about such personal matters. Then the show cuts to another commercial break, and once again, Lily continues staring directly into the camera without blinking. After the cameras stop rolling and the makeup crew steps in, Lily suddenly speaks in a completely different tone of voice while asking Jack whether she already looks beautiful enough. That moment clearly unsettles everyone nearby. Soon after, June pulls Jack aside backstage for a private conversation. She warns him that Lily's condition has become increasingly unstable lately, and that the girl has even started repeatedly mentioning Jack's name as though she somehow remembers him from somewhere. But Jack barely takes the warning seriously. To him, Lily's instability is only making the episode more exciting, which means higher ratings for the show and more publicity for June's new book. From the way they interact backstage, it also becomes obvious that Jack and June may be far closer than they pretend to be. A few moments later, Leo approaches Jack with devastating news. Christou has died in the ambulance after suffering severe internal bleeding, but instead of stopping the show, Jack immediately orders Leo to keep the information secret. He does not want the crew, the network, or the audience to find out what really happened. Meanwhile, one of the crew members starts claiming that he saw something strange moving across the stage, even though nothing appeared on the camera feed. At the same time, Carmichael speaks with the audience member whose deceased relative had supposedly been identified earlier by Christou. But the conversation reveals something suspicious. Before the show even began, Christou's wife had already questioned several audience members backstage. That means Christou may have secretly gathered information beforehand using notes prepared by his wife. Soon after, the next segment begins with Jack asking Dr. June Ross Mitchell about her educational background. June reveals that she holds a doctorate in parapsychology from Stanford University. Carmichael constantly interrupts her explanations, clearly trying to undermine her credibility, which only makes June more irritated. June then explains that parapsychology focuses on supernatural phenomena that traditional science still struggles to explain, including telepathy, telekinesis, ghost sightings, and demonic possession. Over the last 3 years, she has combined ancient occult rituals with psychological techniques in an attempt to restore Lily's lost memories and better understand the entity she believes is hiding inside the girl. June openly admits that many people mock her theories, but she believes every groundbreaking scientific idea is rejected at first. The conversation then shifts towards several artifacts collected from the Abraxas cult compound. One of the items is an old ceremonial dagger, recovered from the ruins of the house. June believes the knife was likely used during sacrificial rituals. Of course, Carmichael immediately mocks the entire idea. He jokingly pretends that the dagger is moving on its own and about to attack him, making June even more frustrated with his behavior. Jack then turns his attention toward Lily. Lily explains that there is another presence living inside her, a being she calls Mr. Wriggles because of the way it twists and squirms through her mind. In simple terms, she believes she is possessed. Almost immediately after that, something strange happens on stage. A theremin suddenly begins making noise by itself. Since the instrument normally reacts to hand movements near its metal antenna, everyone assumes somebody must be interfering with it. But when Gus tries to turn it off, he gets shocked badly enough to send glasses shattering across the table. Eventually, Carmichael yanks the plug from the wall to stop the chaos. Lily calmly claims that Mr. Wriggles caused everything. Hearing that, Jack becomes even more interested and asks whether the entity can actually be summoned onto the show. Lily instantly becomes excited about performing the ritual, but June strongly refuses. In her opinion, the atmosphere inside the studio is far too unstable and dangerous for something like that. Unfortunately, the live audience keeps demanding to see it happen. Desperate to save the show's ratings, Jack sides with the audience and pressures June into continuing. Reluctantly, she agrees to perform the ritual under strict supervision from both the crew and the studio staff. Then the program cuts to another commercial break. Backstage, June is clearly upset with Jack for forcing her into the situation publicly, especially after she already warned him about Lily's unstable condition. At the same time, Gus privately warns Jack not to involve himself in things he does not truly understand because the ritual could be extremely dangerous. But Jack is no longer thinking rationally. All he cares about is saving his television career. Gus also reveals that he already knows Christou has died, and he believes Mr. Wriggles is responsible for everything happening inside the studio. After witnessing one disturbing event after another, several crew members even begin talking about quitting because they are genuinely terrified. Gus gives Jack one final warning and begs him to stop the ritual before something terrible happens. But Jack refuses to listen. Once everything is finally ready, the live broadcast resumes. With the entire crew standing by, June begins preparing Lily for the possession ritual in order to prove that Mr. Wriggles truly exists. For safety reasons, Lily has already been strapped tightly into a restraint chair. As the cameras focus on her, the audio briefly crackles with interference, and June calmly reminds the audience to stay quiet no matter what happens, because Lily needs to concentrate on her instructions. June slowly guides Lily into a trance, encouraging her to relax and drift deeper and deeper into sleep. Then at a certain point, June attempts to directly communicate with Mr. Wriggles, and suddenly Lily changes completely. Her face twists into something horrifying, covered with deep scars and cuts. Her features begin looking strangely masculine, her hair becomes messy and soaked with sweat, and her voice sounds as though two different people are speaking through the same body at once.
Where am I?
Their purpose. Into this realm to better understand your...
What have you done to me, Doctor? Who are these people? He's here, isn't he?
Now seemingly controlled by Mr. Wriggles, Lily turns her attention toward Jack and reveals that the entity has known him for a very long time, ever since they supposedly met among the tall trees. At one point, the cameras even appear to capture a strange face manifesting beside Lily's head. The entity then begins revealing disturbing details about Madeline's death, claiming that Jack is finally free to enjoy himself with anyone he wants, including June. The atmosphere instantly becomes unbearable. Humiliated and furious after their secret relationship is exposed on live television, June completely loses patience and slaps Lily in an attempt to regain control of the situation. But when Lily suddenly tries to bite her, the entire studio falls into chaos. Panicking, June quickly begins chanting a ritual in an effort to force Lily back to normal. But before the possession fully ends, Lily asks why Jack allowed Madeline to die. At that exact moment, electricity suddenly starts surging violently across the studio ceiling. Sparks burst overhead while Lily's restraint chair rises into the air on its own. Then, just as suddenly as it began, Lily regains consciousness.
I'm so sorry.
During the next commercial break, June privately asks Jack what the entity meant when it mentioned the tall trees earlier. But Jack insists he has no idea what Mr. Wriggles was talking about. Not long after, Jack frees Lily from the restraint chair using June's ceremonial dagger. Meanwhile, Gus openly admits that the show has gone far beyond simple entertainment and crossed into something dangerously connected to dark occult practices. But producer Leo immediately dismisses him, calling him weak and ordering him to keep working. Already frustrated and terrified, Gus finally tells Carmichael the truth about Christou dying earlier that night on the way to the hospital. At the same time, Leo excitedly informs Jack that, according to the National Communications Commission, the episode has become the most watched television broadcast since the moon landing coverage. For Jack, this is the comeback he desperately wanted. He is thrilled that Night Owls is finally dominating television again. But beneath his excitement, Jack quietly admits something disturbing. Right before Lily regained consciousness, he thought he heard Madeline's voice. When the broadcast resumes once again, Jack apologizes to the audience in case the possession earlier made anyone uncomfortable. Lily now appears completely calm and claims she feels perfectly fine. She describes the possession as feeling both asleep and awake at the same time. She also apologizes for the disturbing things she said while under the influence of Mr. Wriggles. But Carmichael refuses to accept any of it as real. He immediately presents his own explanation, arguing that the entire incident was staged and questioning Lily's mental state altogether. June is clearly offended by the accusation and insists that she genuinely cares for Lily like a daughter and considers her family. Even so, Carmichael doubles down on his theory. According to him, Lily was simply hypnotized by June and manipulated into behaving as though she were possessed. Jack becomes frustrated hearing this because, from his perspective, the changes they witnessed were impossible to fake. Lily's face changed, her voice changed, and her chair even floated into the air. To Jack, Carmichael is nothing more than a smug skeptic desperately trying to tear everything apart. But Carmichael remains completely confident. Since he is also experienced in hypnosis himself, he decides to prove his theory live on air, using Gus as his demonstration subject. The studio lights dim, and Carmichael asks Gus, the audience in the studio, and even viewers watching from home to relax and focus carefully on the movement of his pocket watch. Then he asks Gus to talk about his severe fear of worms. The moment Carmichael snaps his fingers, Gus suddenly begins feeling intense heat and itching all over his body. Within seconds, horrifying worms appear to crawl out from underneath Gus's skin and even from his eyes. The reaction is immediate. People in the studio panic in disgust and terror.
They're inside me! Oh, God.
Please, Gus, I feel so silly.
Here. Awake!
But the truth is even stranger. Carmichael has hypnotized almost everyone watching, including the audience at home, making them believe Gus's body is covered in worms, even though none are actually there. Still unconvinced, Jack orders Leo to replay the footage from moments earlier, and the recording proves Carmichael is right. There were never any worms on Gus at all. Only a handful of people in the studio seem unaffected by the hypnosis, including Lily, who has been laughing the entire time while everyone else watches in horror. June insists that she never hypnotized Lily, the studio audience, or the viewers at home. But Carmichael continues accusing her and claims she should be ashamed after being exposed. At that point, Lily suggests replaying the footage from her own possession as proof that what happened earlier was real and not simply mass hypnosis like Carmichael's trick. So the recording is shown again, and this time everyone notices something terrifying. For only a split second, the camera appears to capture the image of Madeline. Suddenly, the earlier reports from crew members who claimed they saw strange figures near the cameras no longer seem so ridiculous. But even after seeing that, Carmichael still insists the entire thing is fake. He accuses Jack of secretly working together with all the guests, including Christou, to create outrageous supernatural drama purely for ratings. Then everything completely falls apart. Electricity suddenly erupts across Lily's body, as if some unseen force is tearing her apart from within. Her body twists violently, her face splits unnaturally, and the true form of the entity known as Mr. Wriggles finally begins to reveal itself. Within moments, the entire studio descends into absolute chaos. Panic spreads everywhere as the situation spirals completely out of control. The destruction becomes so extreme that Carmichael himself is burned alive in the middle of the madness. Terrified, Jack runs backstage trying to escape. But instead of finding an exit, he suddenly begins shifting through random moments from old episodes of Night Owls. No matter where he runs, he keeps getting dragged into different broadcasts from the past, including the episode where Madeline herself once appeared as a guest. After that, Jack suddenly finds himself reliving the moment he signed his contract with UBC. From there, two masked figures escort him deep into the center of the Grove gathering. Waiting among the crowd is even the leader of the Abraxas cult, proudly celebrating the massive success of the live broadcast. Jack is then forced to drink from a ceremonial cup, while the robe members surrounding him cheer wildly. Moments later, he enters another room where Madeline lies weak and dying. That is when the horrifying truth is finally revealed. The Grove really did give Jack the fame and success he always wanted, but in exchange, a terrible sacrifice was required. Madeline was never the only victim. Jack himself had already surrendered his soul to the cult long ago. It turns out Jack made a pact deep within the towering redwood forest, a pact with the same demonic entity known as Mr. Wriggles. the very same entity worshipped by the Abraxas cult, the same demon that possessed Lily and allowed her to survive the mass suicide at the compound years earlier. And now, after giving Jack years of fame and fortune, the demon has finally returned to collect its debt. That is why the live broadcast descended into complete chaos. Everything happening that night was part of Mr. Wriggles demanding payment from Jack. As the nightmare continues, Madeline begs Jack to end her suffering. But the horrifying reality suddenly becomes clear. Jack was never speaking to Madeline at all. Under the influence of Mr. Wriggles, the person he actually stabbed was Lily. By this point, the entire audience and almost all of the crew have already fled the studio in terror. At the end of his career, Jack is left standing alone in complete shock and confusion. Then police sirens begin echoing in the distance. It is obvious what comes next. Jack will be arrested for Lily's death and held responsible for the horrifying disaster that unfolded during the broadcast. In the end, Jack really did gain fame through a deal with a demonic force. But the price was far greater than he ever imagined. The pact did not just claim Madeline's life, it also led to the deaths of Gus, Carmichael, June, Lily, and Christu. And just like that, everything the demon once gave Jack disappears in an instant. His career is destroyed, his life is over, and now the once beloved television icon is left with nothing except the nightmare he created for himself. So the moral of the story is never trust a kid named Mr. Wriggles and maybe cancel the live show the moment people start floating and vomiting black goo.